Welcome to Season 8 of Radio Free 501c, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Consulting. Don't forget to subscribe or follow us. We're in Season 8 and we still have a lot to talk about. Radio Free 501c is supported by USAE News, the weekly community newspaper of Association CVBs and hotels. Learn more at usaenews.com. She's back. It's one of my favorite guests, and I hope yours. It's Cynthia Lockrey from Lockrey Communications. She's here to talk with us about mental health in the workplace and why it's so vital. It's Monday, July 13th, 2026. Welcome to episode 334. Welcome to this episode of Radio Free 501c, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Consulting and our podcast partner, USAE News. If you are not familiar with USAE News or want to get a subscription, check out their website, conveniently named usaenews.com. So thanks, USAE News, for your ongoing support. Hi, I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. I'm the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips Consulting, and so glad you're here. Let me take a moment to remind you, please follow or subscribe to Radio Free 501c on your favorite podcast service. We are coming up on 350 episodes later in 2026, and you don't want to miss any of these great conversations. There's a reason we're still around, and we feature new ideas and new voices. So check us out on your favorite service. We're on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, everywhere. So check us out. And this week, I'm welcoming back a returning guest, one of my favorite guests, because she always makes me think. It's Cynthia Lockrey, and we are here to talk about mental health in the workplace. A very important topic. But before we dive in, Cynthia, welcome back. Would you like to say hello and tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, I am so glad to be here again. I'm a professional speaker, a corporate trainer, and a coach. And what I really do is help people gain the clarity and confidence to communicate their message so they can be heard. There's a lot of information out there right now, but what people are really wanting is a human connection. And that's what I help people find.
Well, and the human connection is really what life here on planet Earth is all about. So, for all of us living here on Earth, I hope we're all having a good summer, no matter what hemisphere you're in. I know in the Eastern Hemisphere, it's a little colder this time of year. But let's get back to mental health because it is a planetary issue. It affects all of us. The issue of human connection is crucial. A lot of data shows that people who have at least a couple of strong relationships actually are healthier longer than people who are living in isolation. We're seeing a lot of people, they're trying to just interact with people on social media. We're seeing people now starting to push back a little bit against social media very slowly, but we want to actually talk to people. It's one of the things I like about video connection, video technology, is we can talk in real time to another person and see each other. It's not quite the same as being in the same room, but when you live on the other side of the continent, right, Cynthia,
That's
sometimes
right.
that's the only way
On the
to
West Coast.
talk. So, well, let's first of all, I want to say the audience may not know this. You define yourself as a communications expert
Mhm.
broadly, but you work on a lot of different kind of issues. And so you are working more and more on issues like mental health. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got into working more in that area, or if it just seemed like a natural flow? So how did you start working in that?
Well, I've long been an advocate for people with disabilities. I'm a mom of an autistic child, a sister of an autistic man,
Hmm.
and mental health comes unfortunately too often connected with a lot of disabilities, especially neurodiversity. And to be honest, I was harassed in the workplace. I have gone through some mental health challenges of being harassed. And I've seen over my career the shifts in the conversation about mental health, but I think some organizations are still dancing around it. It's because it's uncomfortable. And some people, when there's an uncomfortable conversation, they lean into it. They gain the knowledge. They look at ways of how they can have it. Other people, this is any uncomfortable conversation, they kind of turtle in or they put up a wall. We're just not going to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. Just because something's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not happening, doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking about it. So, in the work I do, I've talked to lots of people. People confide in me about their mental health. I've done training for organizations, speaking, and it's something that I think we should be talking about, and not just skirting around the edges, but actually having meaningful dialogue like we're going to have today.
Mhm. Well, I hope it's meaningful. It's kind of our goal here. But in all seriousness, I think you talk a lot about helping people build confidence so that they can communicate clearly. And I think a lot of confidence comes from mental health because confidence comes from knowing yourself, having good self-esteem, self-respect, and feeling comfortable with yourself and talking to other people. So, how do you translate what you do, helping people be better communicators or talk to each other better? And how do you weave in that topic of mental health so that they know it's okay to talk about it?
So I'm going to give you a great example. I was asked to do a workshop for an organization about communications, and it was how they could better like audit and look at the effectiveness of their communications. And brought up mental health, right? How are we also looking to see our communications safe? Are they safe for the people creating it, and are they safe for the people receiving it? Because some of the terms you use can be triggering. And the client said, "Ooh, we don't talk about mental health. That's not a cultural our organization culture. They talk about it, but it's not real." And I said, if you're waiting for somebody here to flip a switch and change the organization culture, it's not going to happen. So, is mental health important to your team? Well, this team had experienced the loss of a team member. They'd been killed in a car accident on the way to work, and they hadn't dealt with that. And she said, well, it is, but the organization. I said, well, let's just focus on your team. And so we did discuss mental health and we did talk about if you're asked to do something, if it's triggering, how do you have that conversation? And she came back to me after, and it's a ripple effect.
Mm.
When one group starts prioritizing mental health, and I'll give you another example. I was speaking at a conference and I heard one of the other speakers from the Canadian Mental Health Association say what his team does. When they have a meeting one on one, even as a small team, sometimes they'll say, "Where are you today?" 1 to 5. 5 is I'm rocking it. 1 is I'm not doing great. You don't need to say why you're a 1 or a 2. But if we're having a meeting and you say, I'm a 2 today, then the conversation is, how can I support you? Or is there anything you need?
Mhm.
Versus, well, why aren't they pulling their weight? The judgments that we make. So again, having these conversations in whatever way. So in the one organization, they didn't want to have it because didn't see it was the culture. In another, the culture has embraced it and they found a way that works for their team, which is not going to be the same. These corporate thou shalt doesn't always work because every team is different.
Well, and I think it diminishes our humanity to make people pretend like everything's fine when it's not. I think it is detrimental to teamwork. It's definitely not good for overall culture because when people come to work and you can sense a dark cloud around everyone, that's not good. And you really do feel that different energy. I have an example I use in a variety of ways, but uh, for it fits this, the mental health aspect. So I was working at a association, especially bar association years ago. And I went to work Monday and everybody had been in a good mood, getting along. Everything was fine. You feel good energy. I'm like, oh, that's great. And Tuesday I had to take a personal day because we had to have work done on our house. So I stayed home. I came back Wednesday and it felt like somebody died. And I went around and I'm like, what's wrong with everybody? It's so weird. It's like just between Monday and Wednesday. And it turned out somebody had done something really egregious and was instantly terminated. And that just totally affected everybody's mindset and affected their worldview. And it just brought everybody down. And it took me quite a while to figure out what happened. I had to keep asking people, and they said, oh, I don't want to talk about it. And then I said, well, why are you so upset about it? When I found out what it was, well, if she got fired, that means we can all get fired. And I said, are you going to expose confidential financial information and frame a coworker for that action? Because if you're not, you're probably okay. But it's that impact and not talking to people and that leadership at that group at that time. They didn't tell anybody anything, and they were actually kind of harassing to people. Like they were very manipulative and just created bad mindset sometimes anyway, even when something bad didn't happen. And so then you have something bad happen, it just fed into it. And so there was no guidance of you're all okay. This person was a bad actor, and that's why that person was let go. So you really do feel that energy. I mean, you probably walk into some of your clients and feel that.
Well, and I think the thing is we have to realize what we tolerate, we allow to grow.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times these microaggressions, I mean, the people listening probably all have an example of a toxic workplace situation. I know I do, my clients do, and it usually starts with tolerating things, and then it allows it to grow and grow. And now you're at a point of, you've got workplace culture issues, you've got toxicity, you've got staff turnover, you've got people not engaged in the job. And I think the other place is we need to look at what are we tolerating and at what level. Because sometimes we organizations are more strict with frontline staff than they are with leadership or board members or elected officials. So I work with an organization where they had a board member who was tolerated for well over a decade for these microaggressions. And finally, a staff member said, like, enough, this is harassment. And the staff member created the paperwork, and they got rid of the board member. Well, guess what happened? The board was relieved because they were living in the toxicity. They got new board members who brought a fresh perspective, who wanted to be there. The staff didn't feel like they were under threat, but it took over a decade for somebody to say, I'm not tolerating this.
It shouldn't take 10 years for somebody to act. And I've really come to the conclusion the last few years that this planet is desperately in need of grown-ups.
Yeah.
And what I mean by grown up is an adult person who is intelligent enough to realize that certain things should not go on or be tolerated and figures out a way to deal with it. Because so many times it just takes what you just outlined. Somebody saying, enough is enough. I'm going to do something about it, and taking that risk. And you may remember, Cynthia, I have the LPEC, which is a certification in ethics and compliance. And one of the five pillars of a high quality ethics and compliance program is speaking up. People need to be able to talk. So, how does that fit in with helping people talk about mental health and thus keep their mental health more positive? I guess that's a good way to say it, a more positive mental health.
I think we need to normalize the conversation, not sound bites, not like the cheesy poster, actually normalize it. And, I interviewed a CEO for a magazine article I wrote about who had to leave his job because of his mental health, because of of how he was being treated by the people that the board that he reported to. And one of the things that he said that he regretted is he didn't share with his leadership team what was happening to him. So he was acting out and he was having, and so it spread through the team. And when he finally reached a point where he was honest and he had the conversation, then they came back together as a team because, we've talked about before judgments and curiosity. People are quick to do judgments. So I think in mental health, it needs to be an ongoing conversation. As an organization, how do we normalize this conversation? If you go to YouTube, there's fabulous short videos talking about anxiety, talking about marital stress, talking about the death of a pet can be very traumatic and sharing these with staff. Maybe at the beginning of a meeting, you have a mental health moment. You share some information. Maybe you give a free subscription to a mindfulness app to your staff. Maybe you look at different gym memberships. What is it that people, and not to everybody, because that's not going to be great for every person. What do people need to support their mental health? How do you as an organization, you can't do all the work. We're not expecting you to do all of these things, but what it is it's normalizing the conversation because this generation, the younger generations are talking about it openly, and some generations are saying, well, this new staff, they're too soft or they're too this. No, they're leaning in and talking about something that previous generations have ignored, but it doesn't mean it wasn't happening.
That's right. Well, and I think another aspect of that example is the fact that when you're younger, things seem much bigger and much more intense because you don't have the life experience yet to know it's going to be okay, it's going to work out. So that's like, think back to when we were teenagers. Oh, the
Mm.
drama. Oh, the terribleness of everything. And because we were so young and we didn't realize, well, this is not forever. So
Mhm.
when you're like 15, it seems like, oh, my life is over. It's ruined. I'll never get a boyfriend. And we just think everything's so horrible because we haven't seen things play out all the way yet. And so then when you get older, you say to yourself, oh, well, like I have a saying I use a lot, this too will pass, like a bad kidney stone, but it will pass. So it's going to be uncomfortable and it might hurt for a while, but it will pass. So when you're older, you can take that attitude. I think that a lot of people, when they get older, they pretend they were never young. And you have to remember, yes, you were young once too, and somebody took the time to mentor you or have a conversation with you, even if you didn't believe them at the time, like when your parents sit you down and say, things will get better. It doesn't seem like it right now, but they will. And you're screaming into your pillow, no, it will never get better. It will never change. And then you look back and go, oh, wow, I can't believe that I ever acted like that. But I think a lot of people trick themselves into thinking they were never 15, so it,
Absolutely.
it makes it hard.
And if you see somebody on your team, and you don't even have to be the leader, just
Yeah.
anybody, and if somebody goes quiet or
Mhm.
somebody seems off, just like you were saying in your story, check in and don't say, how are you? This is the thing. How are you doing? I'm fine. We say, and then we let it go because we don't actually want to find out how somebody's doing.
Mhm.
But take that time and do you want to go for a coffee? Take that time because if they're struggling, they're not being productive anyways.
That's right.
So why not create that safe space? And the more people that do that and the more safe spaces we create, the more people are going to ask for help before it becomes a crisis or help you understand what they need so that you're not judging.
Yeah. And I think the judging part is one end. I'm not going to say one end of the spectrum because it is, but it seems like people go one extreme or the other. They're either being very judgmental, oh, they're just too soft, or they're just hands off. Well, I don't want to get involved. And we see that a lot in the news lately. And when I say lately, I mean like the last 20 years, especially. People will video someone being robbed or beaten up or having their dog stolen, but they will not step in and help.
Hmm.
So we have created a lot of passivity. Well, I don't want to get involved. And so what I say is, well, if you're not going to help someone else in trouble, how can you expect somebody to help you when you're in trouble? And we have to keep in mind when people are having a bad day, let's say, maybe you're just having a bad day. You got up, the coffee maker was broken, you didn't realize the car was out of gas, you had to call a ride share, you were late for work anyway. You found out you missed a meeting because you were so distracted that morning. So, nobody is in a good mood when that happens. And taking a step back and saying, hey, can you just maybe want to go out and take a walk around the block or just sit quietly in your office for a few minutes and let's give you some space to feel better about yourself. I think that's a great approach.
And we've talked about grace before,
Mhm.
giving people grace. And that is, and some people want to talk and some people do not. And just because I might want you to talk does not mean that's what's best for that individual. So I think a lot of it is, educating yourself on mental health. If you don't understand mental health, educate yourself. I do a workshop on how to be kind to others while being kind to yourself, how to lead with kindness. And in it, I talk about the self care, and it's a self care wheel versus, people think lattes and massages. And I had a man in my workshop, and he kept talking about his fishing. He loves to fish. He loves to fish. He does this, and he at break, he's talking about the fish he caught. So when we got to the self care wheel, I said, Brian, let's just assume that's his name. Brian, what happens when you don't go fishing? Oh, you don't want to be around me. My wife knows I have to. He never realized that fishing was self care. For him, fishing is self care. And so a lot of it is what is it that I need to do to care for my health that will care for my mental health as well? For me, I live on the West Coast where we have massive rainforest. I hike. I need to be in nature. I need to hike. I need my walks. And that helps calm me. I couldn't live in a city that was all concrete because I need the nature connection. If everybody has something they need, and so look at that balance, but there's also sleep, there's hydration, there's spiritual, whatever that looks like for you. There's, as you mentioned before, the human connection, meeting with friends. So think of what is your wheel. And when something's out of balance, it'll affect our physical health and our mental health.
I think that is great advice. And we may not all have a copy of your wheel, but we could maybe make our own wheel. Some of us like a massage and a latte, and some of us like to fish. I know I like to garden. I love to hike too. I like being in nature a lot too. And I don't know if this has made it to the West Coast. It may have come here from the West Coast, but here you can do what they call forest bathing, and you
Oh,
do a
yes, that's very
guided
West Coast.
meditation. Is that for, I was going to say, that's, I guess it, yeah, I should have known. Why did I suggest it was different? But, things like that, taking that time, planning your time to do what you want to do. Like my birthday's in June. And so last month I took a long weekend and didn't go out of town or anything, but I just planned all things that I like to do. So like
Hmm.
we went to restaurants that I liked. We went to the Hillwood Museum and Garden with a couple friends and we walked around the garden and we saw the exhibits. And I just, it's my favorite place in the DC area. And that's what I did. I'm like, this is what's going to make me feel better and relaxed and be able to come back and deal with whatever it is I have to do after my birthday. So we do need to plan those days off and do something we want.
Yeah.
and leave the email behind us.
And we also need, as organizations and leaders, we need to help people understand that because it doesn't come naturally. My fisherman friend, Brian, it did not resonate with him. And the next time I saw him, because, with organization, you go back and do more workshops, he was like, I'm doing self-care, I'm out fishing. So I think as organizations, we need to help people understand what they can do to support their mental health and the diversity that gardening, fishing, hiking, and forest bathing, going back to that, that was a concept that emerged from Japan due to severe mental health challenges that was resulting in loss of lives. And they did research about time in nature. So they coined it, they marketed it, the forest bathing to encourage people to go into nature because it helped with mental health. So I think as an organization, bring in somebody or heck, order lunch and do some conversations, these lunch and learns, but make them fun, not some boring PowerPoint, and talk about mental health. I worked in an organization where they did a survey. Well, a bunch of us like to walk, but we want company. Well, the walking group was created. Then we had a yoga lunch. Then they had, I arranged at the time I had a baby. I arranged a luncheon once a month for moms that had kids under the age of 5. And we
Wow.
could share parenting or dads. Sorry, dads were
Yeah.
allowed too.
Yeah.
And so again, as an organization, don't be passive in this because it is costing you. There is a return on investment as a person and as an organization when we invest in mental health and supporting people. And when we ignore it, we tolerate, we don't talk about it, it is costing you.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned earlier, ask somebody what's going on, maybe take them out for a coffee because they're not being productive anyway. And I think we don't think about mindset. So mental health is also your mindset. Are you having a good day? Are you having a tough day? Are you focused? Are you lacking focus? So mental health does really affect our productivity and our ability to interact as a team member when we're at work. So, what are some things you've mentioned collecting data in Japan? I know you're a big fan of collecting data like I am as well. Is there a way you can tell that there's a problem in a specific part of your organization? Let's say, like in a specific department or program center.
Absolutely. So look at your absentee, look at your sick time. Look, not across the organization, but dig down a few layers. Is there an area, a manager, a section that there's more sick time, turnover rates,
Mm.
retention, recruitment? Are you having a hard time recruiting into a certain position because people talk? The word gets out that you don't want to work there, or ooh, that's the manager, you don't want to work for them. The data will show this. The other thing, it was funny, I worked as a communication manager for a very large local government, and we had a cafeteria. When things were super stressful, I would go on coffee breaks. I rarely went on coffee breaks, but during the most stressful times and the busiest time, I always went for coffee. And one day the CAO saw me and said, I saw you drinking coffee at break time. How do you have time? And I said, this is when you need to listen. I go to the cafeteria and drink coffee with the union workers. I was senior management. We were around the same age, so we were friends. And I didn't talk. I sat and listened. And then you get the pulse of what's happening in an organization, not by being at the top, talking down, but by sitting, drinking coffee, showing up in the lunchroom with your brown bag lunch and listening.
That is such a good idea and very easy to implement for all of us. And you reminded me of an experience I had when I was a chief staff executive at a long-term care association many years ago. And I went to my first annual conference for the organization. And my predecessor at the organization, the previous CEO, she stayed in her hotel room and did not come out and talk to people. And that was her way. So that was how she did things. She would maybe have meetings with people in her suite because, she would get the big suite, of course. So she could have meetings or do work or whatever it was, but she really didn't get out and about and mingle with the members. Well, I was eating lunch at a table of members and they all looked at me and said, "Why, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm eating lunch." And they said, "But you're here with us." And I said, "Well, that's because this is where you are. How am I going to find out what you think if I don't sit here and have lunch with you?" So it's really, you also have to, I think, as a leader, be open to that kind of vulnerability of, you know, maybe being a little embarrassed that they're wondering what you're doing there, but just kind of work through the embarrassment part, because things that you and I might take for granted as the way we should interact with other people are really amazed that you're doing it. So I think that those simple things, just listen, offer to have a coffee, give people that space to be human. Did you have any other tips in that area?
So Brene Brown, who I know that both of us adore, talks
Mhm.
about vulnerability and talks about stories. I do a keynote on how stories are at the foundation of human connection. We both shared stories today.
Mhm.
You know what? Don't talk to people. Share stories. Ask questions. Ask questions to hear what someone's saying, not to hear when you can talk next. And so, really show up. But as a leader, the most relatable leaders, the leaders we love, are leaders who show up with authenticity. You know what? Yeah, my child went through a mental health struggle, and this is some of the, or yeah, I really have had a tough few days, or that this global event or whatever has hit me hard. And be honest. This is what people want. And when you're a leader, and it doesn't even have to be the top, anywhere in an organization or in community, people want to see human. They want to see the human experience. And so that's how you show up. So really eating lunch with people and not going to a fancy restaurant where you're paying the bill and showing your power around, bringing a brown paper bag into the lunchroom and just talking to people and remember people's stuff. How many kids do you have? What grade's your kid in now? How's this? Like, try to remember some of those pieces. And if you're somebody who's saying, I can't remember it all, well, then why don't you ask questions?
Yeah. And it's a great way to continue the conversation. Let's say you don't remember how many kids somebody has. I say, "Yeah, I remember you told me you had children. How many do you have and how old are they?" And then, oh, sure, people loved, and we all love to tell the same story over and over again, right? We all have our library of stories, and a lot of our stories fit different situations. So it's a great way to share our commonality. One of the things that the longer I live here on planet Earth, as I like to say, the less I understand why people don't see how much we actually have in common. And we're unfortunately living in an era of fragmentation
Mm.
and insularity. And this has happened before in human history. It's not an unknown thing, but I would think at this point we should know better.
Absolutely. And I think we need to look at how do we connect with people, not how do we divide, how do we connect?
Mhm.
And so and with mental health, what has changed with mental health is the openness. Not everybody, but more conversations. But if you think we've had enough, you're incorrect. We need more. We continue to need more conversations to continue to create those safe spaces to normalize, but also that safe space that you can check in with somebody And that when somebody checks in with me, that I don't have to tell you my whole life story. I don't have to disclose anything. That's my right. But at least I know that someone cares.
Mhm.
Versus you see me struggling and you walk by my cubicle and do nothing because you think somebody else is going to do something, or you don't want to intrude, and that person feels completely disengaged with the organization. And they either, we talked about job hugging or quiet quitting. They're sitting there disengaged, low productivity. And it's hard to be engaged when you think nobody cares about you as a human being, mental health or not. So I think that all of us have a job to play, to check in on people and to realize we don't need to know their whole story because that is up to them. But we do need to let people know that they matter.
That's right. And that takes a certain level of sensitivity, which is why we need more grown-ups, because you need to know, how do I guide this conversation? And you also don't want to embarrass people. So I'm in a couple of networking groups, virtual networking groups, and I saw somebody on one of the calls recently, and this person just didn't look very good. They looked really down, and they're usually a very bright, positive energy kind of person. So instead of saying it in front of everybody, I sent them a direct message in the Zoom chat and said, "Hey, how are you doing? Are you okay?" And they responded, "Oh, I just have a little bit of a headache today." And I said, "Oh, so that's why you look so uncomfortable. Well, I hope your headache feels better." So I don't know why this person had a headache. Hopefully their headache cleared up shortly thereafter, but not calling attention to it as well, because we we show up at things and we try to keep our bad stuff to ourselves, especially in like professional networking groups, no matter how friendly everybody is. So we want to make sure we're not embarrassing people too, because there's more to mental health than just saying, "Hey, what's your problem?" Which, like, I think a lot of people might say.
Yeah. And you know what? There's a saying, people always say, do unto others, do you have do unto you? That
Mhm.
is not true because what I need is not the same of what someone else needs. So we cannot put our own assumptions about what I need is what you need. So
Yeah,
ask these conversations, and ideally ask it when someone's not struggling. Hey, do you like to like and you can feel, you don't have to say, well, when you're having a bad day, what do you want me to do? But you can feel people out so that
yeah,
when somebody is struggling, I mean, if you're a parent, if you're a child, you've got elderly parents, or you're a caregiver in any way, shape, or form, you know how to read the room with your loved one. And so you know how to approach them on a bad day. You'll never get to that level with a coworker, but at least get to a level that's better than ignore, pretend everything's fine, or assume somebody else is checking in.
that's right. And that's such a good point because, for example, chocolate is not everyone's go-to remedy. So it can be mine, depending on what kind of day I'm having. But sometimes I just eat it because I like it. But I have a friend who also likes chocolate, and she told me one time that she'd eaten like a half a pound of chocolate one day because she was like, "I'm so stressed out." And I'm like, "That's just fine. That doesn't count as calories if you're stressed out." But seriously, paying attention to those things, like when somebody's feeling down, you might notice they're chewing more gum, or they're eating some chocolate, or maybe they're stopping and having cola or something like that. And you can kind of pay attention to that. So I actually shared this example in another networking group. We're talking about leadership in small staff groups. And when I was at the Long-Term Care Association, it was a small virtual remote staff. So we were not all in the same place necessarily. And we were under a lot of pressure because we were down a staff person for a while. And so I found out what everybody's favorite treat was. And then I just sent it to them with a note saying, because like one person liked Twizzlers, one person liked Oreos, one person liked pie. So I'm like, let me find all these things and send it to them. Totally unexpected, out of the blue. because they were all moms and they were all working remotely, virtually, in a full-time job while raising children and doing everything else we do in life. And so I thought, I can't give them a raise, but I can give them Twizzlers. So, and it really helped because I could tell it was starting to wear on them. And so without having that kind of a conversation, like, I can tell this is starting to wear on you. I just said, hey, here are some Oreo cookies. I hope you enjoy them. And thanks for all your hard work. And wow, that really
Well, and
shifted.
I had a manager years ago that knew that our group loved dark chocolate from a place called Purdy's Chocolate here, and he kept I don't know, a whole supply in his desk. And every now and then there would be one on your desk with a note, just a
Oh,
quiet note that I see you, or and it cost him what, $2 for this little chocolate bar. And
wow.
when we got it, it changed my entire day. So think of those. I think that's such a great example of people being just recognized in a way that isn't a massive employee recognition program that you're never going to get the budget for.
Right.
Like I said, paying for an app subscription. The other thing is if you have an employee wellness program, it's funny, I did post-COVID, I did a workshop for an organization and it was a post-COVID debrief, but the number one thing came up was mental health. And the staff consistently said the organization did nothing to support their mental health. The HR director was in. I did debriefing workshops for 800 staff over 3 days. It came up. She was in all of them. They have an employee wellness program. They did a mental health a mental health fair. They have all these things, but they weren't communicating them well. It came back to communications. When I'm not stressed, I don't care where the employee wellness is. But when I am stressed, it's hard for me. Don't assume I know it because I didn't read it when I wasn't stressed. When I was stressed, when I need to access it. So, what we learned from talking to 800 employees, which was a massive investment from the company to bring me in and facilitate, but it was amazing the output we got because we learned we need to communicate in different ways. A poster, go back to the old school posters in the staff room with a QR code because everybody has their phone that
Mhm.
has the information for this. Emails, videos. Remember, 1 in 5 people are dyslexic, so enough with everything being in text. Do some videos. Finding different ways to communicate mental health resources so that it's not one and done or it's not once a quarter, so that when people need to access them, they know. So you don't have somebody like me come in and do a debrief and have 800 people say, we don't have anything for mental health, when this organization had more than most organizations, but they didn't communicate it well.
That's amazing. And I mean that in the true sense of the word, that people don't even think to remind everyone in a stressful time. Don't forget, we have these tools for you to use. They're here for you. That's why we have them.
Well, it was in
So
the S
simple.
drive, so everybody should know who's going
Yep.
through the S drive.
Nobody. I never went through the F drive. I'm not even a fan of the F drive, I'll be honest.
Let it go.
The F drive can go F itself, in my opinion. I mean, it's like people don't do that. People don't look at the shared drive unless you remind them to. You have to drive them to it. If it's not front and center, especially in today's world, I remember many years ago you had to touch someone 7 times before you got their attention, and then it was 11. I don't even know what it is now. It's probably like 137 before you really get their attention. But that is also a lack of leadership, in my opinion, that you're looking at the world, the lockdown world, and you have all these tools, and you're not stepping up and saying, hey, everyone, this is a tough time. Go to the F drive and look at the folder, or call the people that can help you, talk to you. There's so many telehealth options now, which is really great. and can work for everybody's schedule. So I think that's a lack of leadership if you're not reading the room, as the saying goes.
Well, and as I said earlier, we're not lacking information in society. What we're lacking is human connection.
Hmm.
So when you look at the information you have, how do you convey it without any facts? What's the human story of it? And if you can't convey your employee assistance or this, whatever is in that drive, as a human story, then you're missing the human connection. So you go back to storytelling, you go back to the human connection, less about the information, more about the human.
Yes. And what is leadership but connecting with people?
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation.
Yeah.
I
Thank
always
you.
enjoy having you on the podcast and talking with you. And you always bring great insights. And as you know, since you've been on before, I like to ask my guests, what's the one thought you would like the audience to take away today? And how can they get in touch with you if they'd like to learn more?
The thought is have grace. Have grace for yourself. Have grace for the people around you. You don't know what's happening below the surface, just like they don't know what's happening with you. And I'm at lockreycommunications.com or go to LinkedIn. Cynthia Lockrey. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm always happy to talk to people about my speaking and training because honestly, I love helping people find ways to make that human connection.
And thank you. That's a great thought. And I want to encourage the audience to check out your blog. That's how you and I initially
Mhm.
connected. We didn't even know each other. And I liked one of your blog posts and said, hey, you want to be on my podcast? So check out Cynthia's blog as well.
Thank you.
So we have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next time with another great episode. So another reminder, don't forget to follow or subscribe on your favorite service. We're on all of them. And if you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our website, of course, roguetulips.com. You can visit our services page and find out what we do to help organizations bloom and grow. And you can also check out our education page if you're getting ready for the CAE exam this fall. We are continuing to offer our well-known and high-quality ethics session, so check that out. It's great for everyone to learn more about ethics and psychological safety and all those things that help organizations the way Cynthia talked about today. So check out that ethics course. Check out my blog. I'm not quite sure what I'm ever going to write about every week. So find out what I do talk about and sign up for our newsletter. And you can catch up on our past blog episodes, blog articles, I should say. But speaking of episodes, find this episode featuring Cynthia. Share it with your friends and colleagues on our podcast page. You can also find our past episodes and share those with your friends as well. We have something for everyone, so check it out. So thanks again for joining us here on Radio Free 501c this week. And on behalf of Cynthia and myself, we will see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together.